Hey everyone, thank you for joining our webinar on change set limitations. We are going to get started in about 60 seconds, just going to give some more time for people to join, and then we are going to go get ahead and get started. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Abby, if you'd like to go to the next slide. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Just a quick housekeeping note before we go ahead and get started. Attendees are muted. You can ask your questions in the question box, and we will have time at the end to get to those. And we will be recording this webinar and sending you a recording tomorrow, the 5th. So you will have a copy of this. My name is Joe Marshall. I'm the Customer and Partner Marketing Manager here at Prodly, and introducing our speaker today, Abby Malvestuto, who is one of our CSMs. She's going to be answering some of the most asked questions around change sets, and then sort of exploring if there's another way to deploy metadata. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our first question for Abby, which is going to be, what are some of the most frustrating change set limitations that we see people who are using change sets have issues with?
Okay, so the first answer to this, there's quite a few. So we've kind of broken them down into some categories here. First of all, lots of clicks. We have to, at this point, manually select all the metadata fields that we would like to have moved. Anyone who's used change sets before, this is nothing new. Knowing that we're unable to search for fields, we have to scroll through all the options in order to find what we're looking for, what we care about in the metadata fields, and we have to do that one by one. Also, having to manage separate workflows for both data and metadata, which means that we have to click in two different places to accomplish the same goal. Also, we have to, if we are working out of many orgs, we have to set up the change set in more than one place. We know this. We have to set it up in one place and then deploy it to another place. And then on top of that, it can be very time consuming, and it's difficult to track those changes across those orgs. That's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen, is the ability to track these changes and make sure that you're not overwriting someone else's work or even your own. Speaking of that, which, here we go. Salesforce change set records are only kept for 6 months. That's another thing. So if you needed to go back and see some of the other changes that you've made out of 6 months, can't do it. External documentation is needed to know what we have moved and what's been implemented. Again, it's that whole idea of knowing what we did, when we did it, and who did it. And multiple workflows make it more difficult to maintain records and a single source of truth.
So with those issues, is there another way to deploy metadata where you may not run into some of those time-consuming issues?
Yes, as a Prodly customer, yes. So with our spring release, you can now deploy metadata with Prodly, and you can do that the same way you would if you were deploying regular config data. One-stop guided deployments for declarative and config data is now the thing. You're able to filter for specific metadata changes. These are all things that we're going to show you here in a minute. We'll give you a live demo of what that looks like. Also, the ability to compare metadata changes between source and destination orgs to see when was the last time this change was made, is it net new, so on and so forth. Just more clarification around moving your metadata from one place to another.
And let's say I still wanted to use change sets. We have a lot of customers who have change sets pretty ingrained into their release process, deploying declarative data. Is there anything that probably metadata deployments can still do to help you?
Yes. So if you don't want to refresh sandboxes, but you need to make those metadata updates, you can do that. You can use Prodly for pushing metadata changes down to your dev orgs. Also pushing metadata changes to prod with change sets, then seeding the changes to sandboxes with Prodly, all things that we can show you how to do if that's something that you're interested in. In addition to that, the ability of having production hotfixes. So if you need to make a change in order to resolve an issue in prod, and it's just something, a really quick change, we can help you with that. You can push the metadata and the data together needed to recreate the issues in that sandbox, and then make the changes in the sandbox, and then push the changes to production with Prodly. So this is probably the part that everybody wants to see. Exactly what does this look like? So here is the show and tell portion of today's webinar. Let me get out of this for a second. Okay. So this is where it all lives. This is everything that we have now. If you haven't already updated your Prodly instance to the spring release UI, this is what it's going to look like. Guided deployments are where your metadata deployments are going to live. The ability to go in and go from choosing your source, choosing your destination. Do I want to deploy data with my metadata? Not today. So we're just going to skip over that. But now here we are in the metadata section. So as we indicated in a previous slide, which may or may not have been easy to read. Let me see if I can pull that back up while this is loading. Yeah, this would be it. What we can actually see, what it's trying to do, is going to act as sort of a diff viewer. I know this is kind of grayed out for right now until this loads, but what you're actually looking at, it's going to pull up all the metadata differences between source and destination. Once it's done, if nothing shows up here, easy. There's no metadata differences between source and dev. Nothing need to worry about pushing. Awesome. If, however, once it's done, it's going to load a whole bunch of metadata differences between source and destination. You can see if any of that metadata is net new, if any of that metadata was changed, whether or not any of that metadata was deleted. On top of that, since we're talking about the ability to track your metadata changes, I can talk today, it's going to tell you when was the last time this was changed and by whom. That way you can make sure, one, if a change was made to that metadata, you know it was a change that was meant to be made. And two, being you don't want to override someone else's work. So if you've got multiple people that are working on the same project and you don't accidentally want to push something into another dev box, so on and so forth, or moving things up into UAT prior to everything being ready to do so, you can actually have a better idea of what it is that you would like to move and when you would like to move that. So we will give this a little bit of time to load. The reason why this is taking a long time, there are quite a few metadata differences between this source and this destination. So depending on the number of changes that you have between source and destination will affect the load time as far as what is loading here in this screen, obviously. So anyways, we're gonna let this load for a little bit and we'll take some other Q&A. Let's see if we've got any other Q&A here. I'll go back into present mode for you, Joe.
Yep. And we do have one audience question that I think is relevant to what you're showing in the demo. Are you able to deploy partial metadata changes, or do you have to change all the differences at once?
Oh yeah. That's the whole point of the metadata component that we've added to Prodly now is the ability to go through and after the list loads, being able to pick and choose the metadata that you would like to move. So you don't have to move all the metadata in your source or the destination. You pick and choose what you care about. So it could be just a change to an object, a page layout, permission set, um, whatever it is that you'd like to move.
Got one more question, which sort of similar to the question I just asked. Can you select certain metadata instead of waiting for complete diff to load? Or Shauna, I'm not sure if you want to specify more on what you mean there, or Abby, if you know.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Can I select certain metadata instead of waiting for a complete diff to load? I'm not sure what diff.
No. Okay. So what's going to happen? Let's see if it's done loading. Here it is. When you select source and destination and you click on load metadata, it literally is going to load all of the metadata changes between source and destination. And you have to wait for it to get done loading all of those changes because Prodly doesn't know. I mean, we can't read minds, right? So the tool doesn't know what you care about. So it's going to load everything. That way nothing is missed. So then from there, you're going to say, okay, well, thank you for loading 15 pages of metadata differences. I don't really care about 15 pages of metadata differences, especially since, check this out. See how this was coming up as deleted here, but it's also coming up here as new. This was an update to this managed package. Like even those changes are showing up in this list. So I don't want to have to search through 15 pages. I can do this one of two ways. I can search by component name. I can search by metadata type or object, last modified by, if you actually know the last modified by. I mean, that's kind of a dicey, depending on how many hands you have in the cookie jar, right? So from here, I can just come to group instead and say, okay, well, I only care about moving metadata for permission sets today. Oh, this is the only one that shows up. Oh, look, I was the last one who made that change. This is when that change happened. Okay, yeah, this is for sure the metadata change that I would like to move. This is what I'm moving today. We're going to hit continue. This is the only thing that I've got in here. Perfect. And we're going to hit deploy. Boop. Awesome. So now this is in the process of deploying just that single string of metadata. That's all I care about. It's just this. And then from here, this is the same as moving regular data with Prodly. It'll go through and tell you if it is in progress, whether or not it failed. Here's the org IDs of where it was going to, and then whether or not it was completed. And here's your timestamps for all of that. So this is going to be available for anyone who has access to the Prodly org, not necessarily just the person who's doing the deploying. Joe, were there any other questions that anyone else wanted to see anything in here?
Yeah, we do have one more question. Is there the ability to add profiles with metadata?
Yes. Yes. So what you're seeing here, if I go back, now that this is gone, that's the only thing when you do the deployment, you have to like re-specify source and destination. But suffice it to say, oh, you know what? Now I'm curious. Is it going to show up in here? No. Okay. Suffice it to say that just because it didn't show up as a metadata type just now in my list doesn't mean it's not going to show up as metadata type in your list. If you did make a change to a profile or a permission set or a page layout or things like that, when it's done loading and you click on group, it'll show up as a group for profile or permission set or so on and so forth. So yeah. I just didn't make any changes to profiles, so that's why it didn't show up in my list.
Just to specify on that question, rather than adding profiles, does it pull security access automatically?
Pulling security access. I'm not 100% on that. I would have to double check with our product team to like see the extent of what actually comes through, but suffice it to say that it's if it's metadata, it's coming. If it's metadata and it's part of all of that, it's just the same as if you were making a metadata update with change sets. So anything that would happen as part of that is what would happen here. The only restrictions in a sense would be the metadata types, not necessarily what comes through with the metadata at this stage of the game.
Cool. We can get a more specific answer after follow-up afterwards to that person who asked that. And similar question here, Abby. And again, if we don't know this, we might just follow up afterwards. But will profile changes include user permissions and IP login ranges automatically? Assume that's the same answer.
That is, yeah, along the same lines. For what I know is that we support metadata for profiles, permission sets, page layouts, so on and so forth. So it's not so much as subsections within those categories. It is whatever is included in that category. But I can always double and triple check that with our production team. And get the complete list. If anyone is interested, if anyone else is interested in the complete list of metadata that we can support at this time before I think they're looking to expand that in our summer release as well, which will be happening here in a few months. Yeah, we can send that through. Just go ahead and drop us an email and we can email back to you the complete list of what we can and can't move.
Great. Well, I think that was all the questions we had, it looks like. Shorter webinar today, just wanted to be short, sweet, and to the point. Abby, if you want to go back to the slide deck, if you are a Prodly customer and so want to learn more, want to have your CSM walk through this process with you, you can email them directly. If you are not a Prodly customer and would like to see this a little more detail in action, you can get a custom demo at prodly.co/get-demo. So thank you
And
for
that's
your
actually a really good point. Before we close, that's a really good point. So whoever was asking those very specific questions about metadata component moving, this is a good way to do that. We can go ahead and set up a specific to you and your use case and your org demo to make sure that those things can move over. We can absolutely set that up for you.
Great. Well, that is going to conclude our webinar today. Again, as a reminder, you will receive the slide deck and recording in an email tomorrow. And thank you for joining this morning. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
See ya. Thanks.